Good morning and welcome to, I think, the first ever morning edition of Tisky Sour. I'm joined by Aaron Bastani. In about 3 minutes, we are going to react to the Labour leadership election results. So we've got 3 minutes to speculate on what might happen and what it will mean. Aaron, I mean, it's not, I imagine the bookies have already, closed on it being Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner. I suppose first, do you agree with that? Is there any chance we're going to get an upset today? And if we're not going to get an upset, what should we be looking at? Is it the breakdowns in those results?
I mean, I think if Rebecca Long-Bailey gets 40%, within 1 or 2%, I think that's a good result for her. If Keir Starmer wins in the first round, I think that's a great result for him. We saw the polling yesterday, actually. Stats for Lefties were talking about it on Twitter. One thing that surprised me was how badly Lisa Nandy's doing. She had a pretty good start. You know, a lot of people who actually support Keir Starmer and Rebecca Long-Bailey have both said actually the candidates have been underwhelming. Just get on with it. So if there was ever a chance for a third candidate to do pretty well, it was Lisa Nandy. And if she's kind of gone back a bit, that's interesting. So, I mean, let's see. It's a very strange race. It's going to be, on the one hand, COVID-19 gives the potential leader the opportunity to really impose their mark on the party. Nobody's going to talk about it. There's not going to be any public elections till next May. So they can be brutal with internal politics if they want to. On the other hand, I mean, that could look rather sort of pathetic if you do that in a moment of national crisis. And I can't imagine anything more underwhelming than becoming the leader of a party through a social media post.
Yeah, I don't know why they've done this, because at least they could have done a sort of like, 21st century style Zoom call or something where you've got like Keir in his living room giving a victory speech. Because I mean, the really awkward, I suppose we should introduce to the audience how this is working is there was going to be a special conference, but understandably that's been cancelled. Then there was going to be a live stream. So the results were announced, live online, and the winner would make a live speech. The latest iteration of this event is that there's going to be a press release in about 1 minute at 10:45 with the results, and embedded in that press release is going to be a pre-recorded video by the winner. And obviously, because it's pre-recorded, that means we think that all candidates have had to make this video, which is, I don't know, sounds particularly awkward, given that, as me and Aaron have just suggested, who's going to win this race has been quite clear for a while. So there's a bunch of candidates who've had to make leadership speeches in, fairly safe in the knowledge that they haven't won. So I mean, it'll be interesting if any of those leak. It will also be very cruel. But
what would your sort of preference have been, Michael? Them do it in hazmat suits?
I think just in their living rooms. I think hazmat suits would potentially have been, not the most sensitive way to announce the results of a leadership election in the middle of a
I agree.
Pandemic.
I agree. No, but I'm just wondering how else you would do it. I was being
dull way to announce it, but
I was being flippant. How else would you do it? But I guess Zoom makes sense. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they could all have a little studio set up in there. I mean, the Andrew Marr, all the news shows still happen, don't they?
It's true.
It seems particularly unambitious to have done this, via pre-recorded video. I mean, I wonder if they were a bit nervous that, say, like Boris Johnson would do a press conference at the same time or something like that, and then that would mean that you've got a leadership live conference which no one's watching, or it seems like they should be talking about something else because we're in a moment of national emergency. But I do think you could have, made some time for at least a 15-minute live stream. But it was an underwhelming race, and this will be an underwhelming announcement, probably. Not on Novara Media, of course. We will bring the drama that you have been desperate for since this leadership race started.
It's a shame we're not doing this on Facebook Live in a sense, because we could get all like the crying emojis, the heart emojis, like
yeah, that's so true.
The laughter emojis. It's kind of YouTube's a bit, but we think it's a better viewing experience. What do you think that the leader? What's the first thing they should do in terms of imposing themselves in the party?
Well, I mean, the first thing I was thinking about this, I should have looked it up. How quickly do they normally sort of reshuffle the shadow cabinet? Is it a matter of days? Probably Monday, isn't it? So he'll probably reshuffle the shadow cabinet on Monday, and then one of the priorities, like the organisational priorities, will be to get a new general secretary. At least that's what Keir Starmer is briefing. And from the people I've spoken to, that's what people seem to be really worried about. is that the people who are doing machine politics for Keir Starmer, every politician needs someone to do machine politics.
Preferably, yeah.
The people who seem to be, playing that function for Keir Starmer seem like they're on the right of the party. So even if Keir Starmer is a soft lefty, the people he's given charge to when it comes to the organisational stuff are not, let's say, averse to having a purge of left wingers or to stitching up selections and sort of erasing Corbynism from the party, even if Keir Starmer is not suggesting that that's his priority policy-wise. I think organisationally that could.
I mean, I was talking to some people last night, and they were sort of really downhearted end of Corbyn, and I said, look, they can't just jettison the last 5 years because you can't win a general election. The one thing Labour has going for it is the electorate of tomorrow, and if you jettison that, you can't win a general election. And I said, well, look, they care more about controlling the path than winning a general election. I mean, we'll see. But right now, Labour has, there's a way that Keir Starmer can become Prime Minister, but it's not jettisoning the last 5 years.
Mm. I mean, he probably will get a poll boost, do you think? I don't know. I mean, I suppose one thing is that Boris Johnson is now in a honeymoon period because
these are unprecedented times, right? I mean, who knows?
Yeah. But we're in the start of a national emergency. So whoever becomes leader at this point in time is going to be massively trailing the Prime Minister. But over the next, I suppose, 6 months, as we stop seeing, as the public potentially stop giving Boris Johnson the benefit of the doubt about the decisions he's made, that will be when the opposition leader has a chance to sort of have a breakthrough moment. I imagine there is as well. I mean, to be fair to Keir, the optimistic vision for Keir is that, Corbyn was a divisive figure, rightly or wrongly. Boris Johnson is a divisive figure, rightly or wrongly. I suppose actually Keir Starmer is a divisive figure when it comes to Brexit, but there will be potentially some people in the population who are like, I want to support someone that looks like a prime minister, and I didn't really like Boris Johnson, so it's a relief to have this guy who looks like what I'm used to being leader of the opposition.
It's hard to say because, as you've said, even Donald Trump's polling has gone up recently. But if you look at the sort of response to somebody like Giuseppe Conte in Italy, a kind of boring, technocratic guy, people are looking to somebody like him rather than Salvini. And so it's a really good point. This crisis, the way it plays out, the problems it brings to the fore, there may be something of a yearning for a kind of more of a consensus politician. But like you say, I mean, it's easier said than done. These are just words. It would have to be backed up by Keir Starmer doing stuff on Brexit in a way that distanced himself from the last year. Apparently, the Labour Party's website's crashed.
Yeah, oh God, that's just what Gary, our producer. We've got two producers on the stream today, Gary and Fox. Gary's just said apparently the Labour Party's website has crashed. So this is a bit of a shambles. But there are 2,400 of you watching. So thank you for sharing this moment with us. We are expecting this to be potentially an underwhelming end to an underwhelming leadership race. But I do feel like we've had some, interesting, elucidating discussions about it on this channel. You can obviously look back to prior content we've made talking about this race and see if we got our predictions right or wrong. We actually did do a good interview with Rebecca Long-Bailey, didn't we? We've said it was a very underwhelming campaign, but I have to admit, when I sat down with her for an hour, I was quite impressed. I mean, she fielded questions well. It is quite a stressful thing to sit down for an hour-long interview. Not many politicians sit down for an hour-long interview. So for her to do that and field the questions really well with an open mind, I thought was quite impressive.
She was impressive, but and I voted for her. She was impressive, but ultimately, look, every Labour politician should be able to do that. That shouldn't be like a big thing. Oh wow, you sat down for an hour, you had a coherent worldview, you had pretty much a response to every policy problem that confronts the country. I mean, you're a politician. But no, she was. I mean, I've seen people say, I wasn't sure about her. I think she had a sort of average campaign, but the highlight was going on Novara Media. And if your highlight is, rebutting questions for an hour, obviously you've got something about you as a politician. Can I just say you're watching Novara Media? Best for Britain tweeting at Starmer. These things are embargoed. Are they? Who knows? Generally speaking, these things are watertight. Whatever you do today, first thing you can do right now is smash the like button. And of course, go to Novara Media /support.
I can't believe it's a pre-recorded It's a pre-recorded message, and they still haven't announced it before Best for Britain. Right? Okay. Jim Pickard's tweeted, breaking: "I'm hearing that Keir Starmer won the leadership on the first round, and that Angela Rayner won the deputy leadership on the third round."
The third round.
On the third round, yeah.
Well, I would have thought Rayner would win more easily than Starmer.
No, so Starmer on the first and Rayner on the third. Hearing Richard Bergen has come a disappointing third in the deputy leadership race. That's Kevin
who's second?
Schofield. Well, if he's third and Rayner's first, then actually it could be any of the three. Why? This is ridiculous. I can't believe the results are.
I wonder if Rosina Allen Khan has come second in the deputy leadership.
Well, I mean, she's had a more high. No, because I mean, she's been more high profile recently because she's, a doctor, right? So she's quite well placed to speak on the COVID-19 crisis. But most people voted at the start of the race, and she was, not particularly well known at that point in time. Anyway, we're like speculating when the results must exist. So Gary's saying the FT are announcing. What a mess. This is why I suppose maybe this is why they didn't do a live stream, because they can't organize a piss up in a brewery. And
also, live stream tech can get really overwhelmed really quickly.
Yeah, PA is saying Starmer has won. I mean, I suppose the main thing that was memorable from this whole leadership campaign, actually, to be fair to Keir Starmer and his campaign, was his launch video. I think it's the only one memorable piece of content that really came out, which was Keir Starmer, various people from his past saying why he was someone who fought for, equal rights and the Labour movement and racial justice. He had Doreen Lawrence on there. He had Ricky Tomlinson, who I think he'd been sort of representing when he was a blacklisted worker, wasn't he?
Went to prison.
Dewsbury. Was he one of the
Shrewsbury 2 or whatever they were called? Yeah.
I need to get more precise in my Labour history. But in any case, it sort of posited him, and I think quite successfully presented him as someone who does have the values and backstory that one needs to become Labour leader. And when I first watched that, I was sort of like, okay, fair enough. If he's the favourite to win and that's what he's putting out, that's decent. He does have, we've always said on the show, sort of the best CV of any
easily
Labour leadership candidate in our lifetimes, probably. Rose to the top of his field as a public servant, director of public prosecutions. I mean, you might disagree with his decisions, but it's a significant position. And then he could put out this video which said, not only have I risen to the top of my field and am incredibly qualified, but also I have devoted many of my energies to the kind of causes that Labour members care about. Now, you watch that video like, wow, this guy is the full package. You watch the rest of the leadership election, and I started to have doubts. But let's see. I mean, it's also plausible. I mean, we've all been, or I've been quite frustrated, publicly frustrated at the absence of Keir Starmer during the coronavirus crisis. Obviously, as we've said on this show, we thought the government fucked up a lot for the first 2 weeks. And one of the reasons they were able to fuck up, and that has cost lives, is because they were under so little scrutiny. Because people were very keen to say, oh, this is a national crisis. We're all on the side of the government, so we're not even going to ask difficult questions. To me, Keir Starmer's sort of silence felt like that's what was happening. He wasn't going to ask questions because he didn't want to be seen as divisive in a time of national.
Do you think that's true? I mean, he was the front runner. They probably has a very well financed campaign. They would have had internal polling and just not risk. I mean, in a sense, I get that, because in a sense, there's almost this sort of derogation of his duties as a parliamentarian to hold the government to account. But there was a leadership race. I mean, it's if your candidate was 20 points ahead or whatever, I mean, you say, look, can we just wait another week, 2 weeks? I mean, that's kind of understandable.
Well, let's see. The optimistic take, and I still think as a candidate you can afford to be vocal about these things. I mean, look at Biden and Bernie Sanders. I mean, you expect people who want to be prime minister to not wait to sort of have a vision and comment and serious questions in a time of national crisis of a government. But you could be right. It could be that Keir Starmer said, look, I'm going to wait until I am elected leader, and then I'm going to make a big splash, because I kind of want to come in as a new figure, as sort of like we've had a reset. I'm now the guy who's on TV criticising the government, scrutinising the government, and hopefully the public will notice a massive difference in terms of the opposition that was offered before I was elected leader and the opposition after I was elected leader. We're yet to see if he really comes out of his shell now that he is leader of the opposition.
So if I throw the numbers at you, Rebecca Long-Bailey, 27%, Lisa Nandy, 16%, which is really low. Starmer, 56%. What do you think?
I suppose that's not... I mean, it's when you first said 27%, that sounded super low for Rebecca Long-Bailey, but 56% for Keir Starmer, actually, that's not a surprise.
In the first round? In the second round, yeah, I would have said 56, 34. That's entirely plausible. But in the first round, 56%. I mean, that to me shows... I mean, Lisa Nandy was always running a poorly funded campaign. She didn't have massive money behind her. She had the GMB union. Apart from that, no big institutional backers. Rebecca Long-Bailey had a lot of money behind her. She had, Unite gave that campaign £200,000. Now, I know nobody else did, but 27%. Come on. Yeah. Richard Bergen third. Let's get some numbers out.
Yeah. So can we can probably get some numbers on the screen, can't we? Is the Labour website uncrashed now?
Producer Fox. Although my source was very reliable, saying 27% earlier. That's good.
It's worth mentioning sort of like why Rebecca Long-Bailey has only managed to get 27%. And I think it's something we've discussed a lot on this show, which is that there was obviously she was starting from a more difficult position than Jeremy Corbyn. Well, in a way, an easier position because, the membership were much more left wing at this point in time, but a more difficult position because there'd just been a massive defeat for the left. And I think many members quite understandably wanted to move into a position of security.
Yeah, but I mean, you say that, but look, Dawn out first round, Dawn Butler for the deputy leadership. Ian out.
That's disappointing.
That's very disappointing, but she struggled. We'll talk about that maybe later on. Ian Murray out second round, Richard Bergen out third round, Rosina Allen Khan second, Angela first. Again, that's a great result for the right. I mean, Rosina Allen Khan was the right. I mean, Ian Murray was the right wing ideologue in the deputy leadership race. But Richard Bergen, Richard Bergen probably had the best campaign of anybody in the deputy leadership in terms of his. Let's see the numbers, but he sort of rose. But ultimately, there would have been a lot of people on the left saying, I'll back Angela Rayner as a kind of consensus compromise politician. But for Rosina Allen Khan to come second, for Rebecca Long-Bailey to get 27% of the vote, is an appalling set of results for the left, given where they were 6 months ago. And I think it's stronger than just the membership is feeling a bit browbeaten. Because in a sense, you could say, I always thought, well, you can capsize that logic. Keir Starmer was going to win. So you could get many, many people to say, well, my vote doesn't matter that much. I'll vote for Rebecca Long-Bailey. Or even, likewise, Lisa Nandy. People are less perhaps sensitive about the importance of their vote when they think that the winner's already got it in the bag. I think that those two results are terrible for the left.
The email has come through. The press release is out. So we can give you the numbers. Right. Keir and Angela won with 56.2% and 52.6% of the votes, respectively. Oh, but yeah, Fox is right. The numbers aren't in. Sorry. That was some false hope there for some certainty about how severely the losers lost. I was halfway through a point.
I've got the numbers. Do you want to hear the numbers?
Go on. Give us the numbers.
So Rebecca Long-Bailey gets 29% of the members. She gets 22% of affiliates, which is low when you think that Unite the Union have twice as many affiliate votes as all the other unions put together. Registered voters actually weren't a big thing this time around. She got 5% of the registered votes, but there were only 13,000 people who registered as registered supporters.
It made no sense to do it because it was more expensive and you could join to become a member in that same period.
Yeah. So Long-Bailey's got 27.6% of the vote. She's got 135,218 votes. Lisa Nandy, 16% of the vote, 79,597. Starmer, 275,780. What did Corbyn get in the second leadership race? That'd be two interesting numbers to compare. And then we haven't got deputy leader. If Fox, if you could pull up what Corbyn got in 2016, because 275,000 votes is it's just a lot of human beings. You know, you have to compare this to the Tory party, right? If you look at the Tory leadership race, I don't think Boris Johnson even got. Did he even get 100,000? I mean, was it just over 100,000 votes? Obviously, their membership went up likewise last summer. I don't think he even got 100,000. I think Labour NEC internal elections a couple of years ago were getting more votes, basically. But for the winner here to get 275,000 is a massive vote of confidence. And also, look, that's a lot of people. If those people go out and campaign for him, he's got a chance.
Corbyn in 2016 got 303,000. So still...
It's ballpark.
It's ballpark.
Same ballpark.
Significantly less, to be honest. But that was only a 2-horse race, I suppose.
That's true. That is true. That's true. So it's kind of it's broadly the same, probably. Actually, you imagine.
We should talk a bit about why Rebecca Long-Bailey did so poorly. So saying you're saying potentially she didn't even start in a more difficult position than Corbyn did, you know, back in 2015 and 2016. I think she probably did, but I also do think that, you know, she got dealt a poor hand and played it very poorly. And the reason she played it so poorly is because she decided it was almost an apologetic campaign. It was almost like she was sort of saying, "Sorry, I'm standing," and she never criticized Keir Starmer. He did have a number of weaknesses, in particular that, you know, he seems to be very conservative in the small c sense of the word. He's very unwilling to commit to stuff, it seems, at this point in time, and, you know, unwilling to put himself out there, explain what his politics are and what he believes in. He tends to talk in platitudes during this leadership election, at least. And I think that she could have really hammered him on that. Especially, you know, there were some key moments in the campaign where I think there could have been a moment of doubt sowed as to sort of Keir Starmer's ability to lead an opposition party and a socialist party, which was the ones that come to mind especially are in that hustings where he says to an audience in Liverpool, look, you'll be very pleased to know that during this leadership election, I will never give an interview to The Sun. You know, it gets a big round of applause. And then later in the day, he's asked by Aisha Hazarika, well, would you after you become Labour leader? And he says, oh, we'll work that out when we get there. And in the defence of, you know, Keir Starmer's people, when they were defending him, they said, well, look, there was no contradiction there. He said he wouldn't give an interview to The Sun during the Labour leadership election. And afterwards, he said after the leadership election, he might do. True. But why would you know, what does it mean to say during a Labour leadership election, you're not going to give an interview to The Sun? Labour members don't read The Sun. You know, it's the most low-cost commitment that Keir Starmer could make. It's sort of like a lowest common denominator commitment. And my worry with Keir Starmer is that we'll see a lot more lowest common denominator commitments that are impossibly easy to make. You know, you couldn't make an easier commitment, which means that it doesn't mean anything and can end up looking opportunistic and weak. But as I say, we're yet to see. Let's not judge him too early. Aaron, you look deep in thought. Oh, we lost you. Keir Starmer's effective campaign. We'll wait for Aaron to come back. You can do the flip side of that, right? So whilst Rebecca Long-Bailey didn't, you know, break the consensus about, you know, this being not a confrontational leadership election. Oh, we're getting the stats on screen, are we? Great. Angela Rayner, 41%. Richard Bergen, 17%. Wow, that is low. Rosanna Allen-Khan, 16%. Ian Murray, 13%. And Dawn Butler, 10%. Oh, interesting. So whilst Angela Rayner didn't get a majority, all the other candidates were below 20. So a really divided race. And yeah, it is interesting in a way that Angela Rayner didn't get more, but I suppose the more candidates you have, the more split the voting patterns are going to be. There were some people saying, we suggested it was possibly the case on Novara, that Richard Bergen had run a better campaign than Rebecca Long-Bailey because at least he wasn't being so inhibited as Rebecca Long-Bailey. He was, you know, it never seemed likely that he was going to win, but he did seem like he was standing for something. You know, he made some bold commitments. People knew what Richard Bergen stood for. He was the left candidate. He was defending Corbyn's record. And he put himself out there on a few key questions, mandatory reselection, which Rebecca Long-Bailey also did commit to be honest. Then he had his sort of somewhat strange foreign policy commitment, which was that Labour members would have to vote before we entered any foreign intervention, which was a bit practically odd, but at least put foreign policy into the debate, which meant that people had to pick sides. Were they in favour of liberal interventions, or were they, anti-imperialist? Basically, he threw that into the debate, and we thought that was potentially going to pay dividends to him. But it seems like
he wasn't going to win on the basis of it, was he? Sorry, I was cut out there because the service for live streaming is obviously being taken to the dry cleaners. Go on, Michael.
So
we didn't think he was going to win, did we?
What you missed while you got cut out is I was saying we had speculated that potentially he could do better than Rebecca Long-Bailey because he had run the more kind of bold, proud of being a Corbynista campaign that some people thought Rebecca Long-Bailey might as well have run. Considering that the whole unity candidate thing, didn't really work. And it's interesting also the point that at the start of this campaign, we forget because it wasn't really played up during the campaign, but it was supposed to be the Rebecca Long-Bailey, Angela Rayner ticket that was itself sort of like a unifying, powerful force because you've got these two powerful women. Angela Rayner, more of a centrist figure, not in the same way that Progress are, but of potentially the old right of the Labour Party. And those together were supposed to show competence, unity, and youth, and sort of like a future for the Labour Party.
Can I say something? Can I give you a bit of a scoop here, Michael?
Yep.
Do you want a scoop?
I want a scoop. Give us a scoop, Aaron.
So the original plan was for Rebecca Long-Bailey and Angela Rayner to run on this, like you say, this kind of joint ticket. And the point was that there should have been no other left candidate running for deputy leader, obviously because they'd be running against Angela Rayner. And with that understanding, Rebecca Long-Bailey would have got an extra 20 MPs from the Parliamentary Labour Party. But then, of course, Richard Bergen decided to run. And understandably, there's a perfectly coherent argument to say you want a candidate of the left to run. But what that meant is that the 20 extra MPs that were going to nominate Rebecca Long-Bailey pulled out. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us a few things. There's a disagreement about strategy in the Labour Party, in the Parliamentary Labour Party, on the left. But also, if people can't line up those ducks, early on, you probably don't deserve to win. Either candidate.
We have, how many people have we got watching? I haven't got the YouTube open.
2,600.
2,600. We want to get 2,600 likes, It's free. We want to get up there on the algorithm. But basically, the reason, we obviously say it on every show, but I think it is particularly important today because now that Keir Starmer is the leader of the Labour Party, the left basically have to work a lot harder because he is now going to be, nearly all of the pressures on Keir Starmer at this point in time are going to be from the right. The PLP is going to say, can you please, expunge Corbynism from the party? We've had a real rocky 5 years. It was stressful for us. Can you make sure this will never happen again? That's what the PLP will be saying. He'll be having, people who have sort of, the sort of machine politicians who are now gathering around him saying that you have to be strong. You have to get rid of the left when your mandate is big. And you'll also obviously have the media who are suggesting that all of the mud that they'd slung at the Corbyn project, particularly with regard to anti-Semitism, will also stick to him unless he can make a big, bold statement to separate his leadership from the past. And, there will be calls for him to expel very high-profile people, I'm sure. Calls for him to make some big commitments that the left might not want him to make as a sort of sacrifice, as it were, to people who want the party to demonstrate its commitment that it has abandoned leftism. And we obviously think that would be not just a nightmare, politically and ethically, but also electorally, because if they go back to bland centrism, we're looking again at a 2015 situation of getting 30% instead of obviously 32% that we got in 2019 was not nearly enough, but 30% from 2015 was no better. I think we are now going to go to a concluding statement from Keir Starmer's 8-minute video. So this is the last 30 seconds and the sound is going to be top notch this time.
This is my pledge to the British people. I will do my utmost to guide us through these difficult times, to serve all of our communities, and to strive for the good of our country. I will lead this great party into a new era with confidence and with hope, so that when the time comes, we can serve our country again in government.
That was the end.
Well, that was the final 30 seconds of an 8-minute video.
But that was the end.
Yeah. It's weird, the whole thing of, because it made sense when he was running the campaign to say, I'm the one who can get into government. But now he's the leader of the opposition. I mean, that's a gift. You don't win election by saying, we're going to be in government. You win an election by saying, well, why you want to be in government. But
and you also,
I mean, maybe
people memory hole all the stuff about the Blair years. Blair roasted John Major every week. I don't know why there's this thing about you don't attack the government. Obviously not now. I'm not suggesting you do that in the coronavirus in a similar way. I mean, obviously there should be a slow move to that. Hopefully when you get a sort of return to normality. But Major was roasted by Blair. During the ERM crisis, the exchange rate mechanism crisis after the early 1990s, Labour took it. I mean, this was under John Smith. Labour took advantage of that. You know, you do have to take advantage of the party of government making slip-ups. You can't just say, well, we're looking statesmanlike and, you know, we're ready to be a party of government, which you should do. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't. But if you are trying to sort of imitate the 97 lot, I mean, they were critical of the government when they had to be.
Fox, our producer, is making a very good point in the internal chat, which is that, you know, Keir Starmer saying, I'll be in government is the Joe Biden argument. So people ask Joe Biden, what can you do as president? And he said, I'll beat Donald Trump. It's like, no, that's how you become president. That's an argument you can make to Democratic primary voters, because their priority is to beat Donald Trump, just as Labour Party members, their priority is to beat the Conservative Party. But once you've become leader, or in the case of Joe Biden, once you become front runner, or when you're asked specifically what will you do if you become president or prime minister, you can't say, oh, well, I'll be in government.
Well, it's also like it's a logically
implied in the question.
Yeah, it's like saying, okay, how will you get a dog to draw a triangle? Obviously, that's not going to happen. You say, well, I'll get the dog to draw a shape of 3 sides. You've basically said, you know, it's kind of like
the question, right?
Yeah, it's just a different way of phrasing it. How will you win? I'll beat them. Okay.
And it's also in that. I mean, again, we need to keep repeating this. I want Keir Starmer to be a success. I hope he comes out of his shell, roasts the Conservative government, make sure that they have, you know, their feet held to the fire throughout this crisis, because they've made a bunch of, you know, awful mistakes so far. And I think that's partly due to lack of scrutiny. And I hope that Keir Starmer can step up to the plate. But, you know, we're yet to see. I mean, it was a bit awkward, I thought, in that last 30 seconds where he says, I'll have confidence, you know, with all the confidence of a rabbit in the headlights. You know, it's sort of like, I don't know how true it rung. We need the Keir back of that launch video where he talks about all these values he believes in. And
I think that's overly idealistic. Because if people can watch that video, at the end, he's like, we can and we will win. And I was told that was recorded, like, which is normal. You're a politician. You've not done much video. That was recorded like 10 or 12 times, and he just wasn't happy doing it.
Well, the good bits are when other people were talking about him, right? But I suppose that's difficult to do once you're leader, because the good bits of that was it posited Keir Starmer because one of the weaknesses potentially of his candidacy was people saw him as a careerist. Someone who was opportunistic, out for himself. And then in that launch video, what they did is they had a load of people who themselves had powerful backstories, recognized public faces, incredibly trusted, as I said before, Doreen Lawrence, Ricky Tomlinson. And they were saying, Keir Starmer worked for us. Keir Starmer is a selfless person. Keir Starmer is not someone who's out for the limelight and wants power and wants success. He's someone who just wants to help people, which is actually quite similar to Jeremy Corbyn's original message. This idea that he is not a self-promoter. He is someone who works for other people, often, you know, in doing thankless tasks. And that can be a very successful message when it comes to leadership elections. Potentially, you can mobilize it in a general election. I feel like Corbyn did do that, you know, somewhat in 2017. But it is a very risky thing to rely on. After, being leader of the opposition is brutal. And whilst, in your honeymoon period, people will be willing to fight for you, however you perform. After 3-4 years of having mud slung at you, of being embattled by the entire British establishment, it gets to a point where if you won't fight for yourself, no one's going to fight for you.
Let's go through the Labour leaders who've had it easy from the press. Should we go through the Labour leaders?
Yes.
In the
easy.
In the modern era,
presumably.
Yeah. Well, Harold Wilson, absolutely not. Okay.
Didn't they try and organise a coup?
Well, it was a Mickey Mouse coup. I mean, senior people in the British press, I think it was a Lord. I don't want to. I thought
it was the guy in the head of the Mirror, or am I mixing up?
Wasn't the Mirror, Michael?
Well, in the very British coup, it's the chair of the Mirror, and that's based on.
I think no, it's not the Mirror. It was Lord Beaverbrook's son, or I can't remember. It was a newspaper person from the right, and they. It's actually it's in an episode of The Crown. So no, it's not kind of like cod history, or rather, it is cod history, but it's not untrue. Harold Wilson, most certainly not. Jim Callaghan. What was Jim Callaghan remembered for? Crisis? What crisis? Neil Kinnock, roasted by the media. John Smith passed away tragically. Tony Blair had an easy couple of years because of the ERM crisis and Major being such a shambolic figure. Gets into government, but even then, after by 2002, 2003, roasted. You look at Labour's polling for the 2000s. I was looking at this the other day. Obviously, it was low under Corbyn. It was in minus 20, minus 30 for most of the early 2000s. Then in 2005, they obviously win an election. It goes back to minus 10 and goes back again. Gordon Brown, he was derided by the media as a sort of one-eyed, compulsive liar, psychopathic Scot. I mean, that was literally how the Sun and the Mail would present him every day. Ed Miliband, Jeremy Corbyn. The idea that you have to be and look, Keir Starmer could do this. You have to be bloody good, which Tony Blair was as a political operator, and you have to be very lucky. And then you have a window of 3 or 4 years where the right-wing press don't actively destroy you, and you have to be running against a politician they don't like, which you had with John Major in the early 1990s. So the idea that, I just need to not be Jeremy Corbyn and I'll win the media over. This is the stupidest thing, stupidest argument you're going to hear. There's no historical basis for it whatsoever. And so the point is, who's going to protect Keir Starmer when the right-wing media come for him? You would imagine it's going to be people on the Labour centre-left on the left. That's going to be it. There's going to be many people on the right who want Keir Starmer in and see him as a sort of temporary step towards a leader which they would view as Blair Mark II. That's not a conspiracy theory. Again, I've had people from the Labour right say that to me. So, it doesn't make sense for him to purge the exact people who would have his back.
Oh, we're going to get up Rayner's victory tweet. So we can probably get that up now. Rayner says, "Thank you to everyone from the bottom of my heart. I promise I will do everything to repay your trust." Raised fist emoji. "No, we face a long and difficult road ahead, but it's our responsibility to offer the better future that the citizens of our country deserve." That's nothing particularly headline grabbing there, but I suppose nice enough message.
Fist emoji.
We were saying before the show that actually Angela Rayner, until very recently, potentially still right now, is in self-isolation with coronavirus. That isolation might have ended, but she's definitely been in isolation for more than the 7 days. But she might be like Boris Johnson, have symptoms that are continuing.
Can I ask, Michael, where do you think the Labour left goes from here?
Where does the Labour left go from here? So, I mean, in a way, it sort of gives us freedom to sort of build our own institutions, and have some to not be, because there were lots of times during the last 5 years when what the left were doing was being quite reactive to news stories to try and defend their leadership, which was completely under attack because no one else would do it. Now Keir Starmer can fight for himself. I'm not going to be out to try and destroy him. Obviously, I'll apply scrutiny to Keir Starmer, but we can be as critical as we want, basically, because he's got, as you know, the media is full of people willing to defend Keir Starmer. Right?
Is that true though? What media? I mean, we don't know, do we?
All of the centrist Remainers.
Yeah, but they were only given a platform in the media to attack Jeremy Corbyn. Nobody actually cares what most of them think.
That's potentially true.
You'd never heard of these people. I'll give you an example. John McTernan, who actually thinks a very sharp guy, he wrote a nice review of my book in the FT. He's a sharp guy. I'm not saying he's not a sharp guy. You didn't see him on the television until Jeremy Corbyn became Labour leader.
No, but yeah. I mean more the Emily Maitlisses, the James O'Briens, the people who have
James O'Brien. I mean that's LBC. Okay, fine. But I'm talking about political commentators.
Watch Newsnight.
Maitlis is a presenter. I'm talking about sort of talking heads. There was a coterie of centrist talking heads who only really had a role because Jeremy Corbyn was leader. And I mean, it's not just Corbyn. There's a coterie of centrist talking heads who have their role because of Brexit. And now Brexit's over. Where are they going to go?
Who did Ed? Because that's the thing with Corbyn. Actually, to a large degree, he was isolated, like in the media, in the establishment. But at least he had people who would go out there and bat for him, like, with their hearts in it. Mm-hmm. So if you think back to Ed Miliband, when Ed Miliband was being like destroyed, who was going out defending him? I mean, there's that clip of Jeremy Corbyn saying, I think it's pretty outrageous. He said his dad, Ralph Miliband, hated Britain. So you had people like Jeremy Corbyn who were out there, defending him when other people were less keen to do so, because people often don't like to put their necks on the line. We've got some results up, but I can't see it because it's too small on my screen.
I mean, for Nandi to get more than Nandi's got 24% of affiliates, Long Bailey 22%. That shows a complete breakdown of the quote unquote Unite machine. Complete and utter, because Unite have twice as many affiliate trade union members as all the other unions put together. And I always thought the role of the Unite machine was overstated by the media in particular. Jeremy Corbyn did well because, to use Burkean language, little platoons of people all around the country were batting for him. They were doing the phone banks. They were doing social media. They were making videos. And that wasn't happening with Rebecca Long Bailey. And there is this default assumption, especially in legacy media. Older people think, oh, well, if somebody's running a successful campaign, it's top down. There's somebody at the top. There's loads of money. Jeremy Corbyn didn't win in 2015 and 2016 because of those things. But people look for, it must have been this. What was the secret source? It was the Unite machine. It was these operators. It was these people doing the backstabbing. It wasn't. In
terms of party management, so for winning that leadership election, I think it was significant. I remember when I learnt that Jeremy Corbyn had got the backing of Unite and Unison, I was like, oh wow, this is serious now. I mean, they partly piled in once
for credibility. No, I'm talking about the actual sort of campaigning resources. Yeah. It was there's especially with new media over the last 5-10 years, the technological changes. There's a far greater prominence now for voluntarism.
Yeah, where the Unite machine mattered was in. You should have done that in your. I suppose you're in your own home, so it doesn't matter. If you were outside, you should have sneezed.
I should have dabbed.
Yeah, you should have dabbed. I hope you have a antibacterial wipe to hand. Actually, not alcohol wipe.
No,
antiviral wipe.
It's a dusty room. I need to hoover it.
Where the Unite machine mattered was in terms of internal party management. I think. So in terms of selections, the NEC, that was where it. In terms of the general secretary, obviously, that was where there was a Unite machine. But in terms of winning Jeremy Corbyn those two leadership elections, I think that can be overstated. And obviously, as you say, Rebecca Long Bailey coming third in the affiliate section is apparently evidence of that. Oh, but in any case, where should the left go after this? Yeah, build their own institutions, things like Novara Media. Please go to novaramedia.com/support so that we can be building up an independent left-wing analysis of political reality in Britain, putting our ideas forward, even though we don't any longer have necessarily an ideological ally as leader of the opposition, which means that we've got to pile our efforts into building independent institutions. But by independent institutions, I don't mean third parties. As we've said a bunch of times on the show, I think the idea that we now will leave the Labour Party and join a third party is for the birds. I mean, the sort of moral quandary that the left finds itself in now similar thing going on in the States, is that the reason, or one of the reasons, that the centre or the right have the party back in their hands is because, or the major reason is because the left failed electorally. And one of the major reasons the left failed electorally is because they were constantly undermined by the right of the party. And so that puts the left in a moral quandary. Do we pay back the favor and say, you destroyed us, so we're going to try to destroy you? Because, you know, otherwise we've got this unfair situation in the Labour Party, when whenever the left get power, the right attack them and undermine them, and then use their inevitable electoral defeat to justify their marginalization. And you could argue, I don't even have a specific answer to this. You could argue that what the left should now do is say, well, if you're going to do that to us, we're going to do that to you. Mutually assured destruction, as it were. And then,
well, not even just reciprocity. I mean, that's the basis of most moral philosophy or ethical systems.
Reciprocity, but also mutually assured destruction in the sense that they bring us down, we bring them down.
That's the consequence. Right. But the principle is reciprocity. I will treat you as you treat me. I mean, that's quite a normal sort of position in moral philosophy.
But if you think about it, sort of like, you know, in a consequentialist terms, in terms of what would be the consequence of that, I mean, you could say, oh, we're going to have some grand ideological bargain where you prove the strength of your faction by the damage you can do to theirs, and that forces them to bring you in. I think probably it's more likely that would force them to kick people out, or, you know, not force them. I don't think their hands would be forced. Labour didn't do, like Corbyn's leadership didn't do that, but they would have much more cover to do it. I'm not talking here morally. I think that if people on the left behave in similar ways to people on the right did under Corbyn, obviously it wouldn't be fair or just if they were kicked out for that, because, you know, Margaret Hodge wasn't kicked out for that. Even John Woodcock wasn't kicked out for that. So the idea
but we think they should have been. That's the thing. I mean, they weren't kicked out because the Labour leadership was too weak. But they should. I mean, clearly, you can't have an effective political party when you've got members of Parliament saying that the party's leader is X, Y, Z. You know,
and the left won't
prosecution.
Do that.
I mean, it's crazy.
The left won't do that under Keir Starmer. The MPs won't.
No, nobody will. That's the thing. If Labour with a similar programme to what they've got right now, so there's not a complete, you know, rejection of things like public ownership of rail, increasing minimum wage, changing trade union laws. If all those things are stuck with, and Keir Starmer starts polling 40%, nobody will be happier than me. Nobody. I think that's a key difference between what we've seen with the Labour right in the last several years and what we've seen with Keir Starmer. And they can say, obviously, 2017 has been memory hold. The very good polling in the months after it have been memory hold. But there was a period when that agenda had found a huge constituency in the country, and yet they still denigrated it and still tried to undermine it. Yeah. And you have to remind people like Tom Watson, no longer an MP, Wes Streeting, if they had the discipline of the average Conservative MP in the year leading up to 2017, I think it's probable they'd now be on the government benches. You know, Wes Streeting, on the day of the 2017 general election, was talking to the press about how Jeremy Corbyn was a racist. I mean, and then you fall short by, you know, the Independent had a piece on this. Labour could have potentially formed a government if they'd won around the country 2,380 more votes or something, and you fall short by that little, and then there's still no introspection from these people. Clearly, there's a different set of rules that they're playing by, and different sets of expectations. The left is expected to be nicer, and this is a key thing I think from the last 5 years, from this whole experience. Being left-wing, or being a social democrat, a proper social democrat, or being a socialist, this is not about being nice. This is not about being nice. There are nice people who are Tories. There are some not nice people who have, you know, very, you know, they will do they'll go on every picket line, yada. These aren't, there's this weird emotive affect where, like, your sort of moral virtue is actually your politics. To an extent, of course there should be. You know, ethics should bleed into politics, politics into ethics. Of course there should be. But the idea that, like, oh yeah, you have to be nice. Politics is not about being nice. And I was talking about this to my partner yesterday. She was obviously upset. And I said, look, Jeremy Corbyn was too nice a person to be the leader of a political party. Politics is for hard people. It just is. It's not about being nice. Actually, maybe the legacy he has is of far greater importance. Who are the most consequential politicians of the 20th century in Britain? The 21st century? Nye Bevan, never Prime Minister. Nigel Farage, never Prime Minister. Enoch Powell, never Prime Minister. Ian MacLeod, never Prime Minister. Roy Jenkins, never Prime Minister. These are people who shaped modern Britain. They were never the Prime Minister. So, the idea that, what Tory was more consequential in the last 60 years? Enoch Powell, people still talk about him and his legacy in terms of framing immigration, or Alec Douglas Hume?
Or even David Cameron.
Yeah. Nye Bevan or Jim Callaghan? Like, Nye Bevan literally created the NHS. Go out there, 95% of the public don't even know who Jim Callaghan is. They don't know who Nye Bevan is either. Jim Callaghan doesn't really have a legacy. So the idea that, you only have a legacy if you're Prime Minister isn't true. But to be Prime Minister, you absolutely have to be a certain category of person, which Jeremy Corbyn probably wasn't.
We are going to end kind of soon. We've been going for about an hour. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about this story in the coming weeks. Obviously, there'll be an announcement about a shadow cabinet reshuffle at some point, which will tell us a lot about the political direction that Keir Starmer wants to take the party in. Obviously, after that, there'll be some big fights over the NEC and the party, etc. First of all, we're just going to go to one talking point. The Mirror today, right, that Boris Johnson asked all party leaders to work together with him on coronavirus at the exact moment Jeremy Corbyn leaves office. The Prime Minister released a letter to opposition chiefs just an hour before a new Labour leader is due to be announced to take over from Mr. Corbyn. He invited all opposition leaders in Parliament to a briefing next week with himself, the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Scientific Officer. Mr. Johnson added, "As party leaders, we have a duty to work together at this moment of national emergency. I want to listen to your views." The PM's letter stopped short of proposing a government of national unity where rival parties rule together to find a way out of the COVID-19 crisis. So we'll talk for a couple of minutes about national unity, and then we'll go off and enjoy our Saturdays inside our homes or taking 1 hour's exercise. Aaron, presumably you think it would be silly of Keir Starmer to get involved in a government of national unity at this point in time?
There's a few things going on here. The first is, yes, I don't think that's what the government want. They've got a majority of 80. They don't need a government of national unity. But what they should do is it should blunt criticism. And I think sometimes when you think something's going to be a clusterfuck, you want to involve as many people as possible because it gives you relatively clean hands. And we know over the last 2 months that this has been entirely mismanaged, not just by the government, but by Public Health England, by the Chief Medical Officer, the Chief Scientific Advice. There's several people here. There's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, etc. As we've said repeatedly, from late January through February, several times from Public Health England, from Matt Hancock, the British public was told COVID-19 presented a low risk and that the NHS was prepared. Two things that weren't true. They were categorically untrue. And so what this would do is act as a certain kind of insurance policy. Now, does that mean that and by the way, who else is going to get the Lib Dems? Who's even leading the Lib Dems? It means just Keir Starmer. That's all it means. Rival parties. The Greens, Plaid. It means the SNP in Scotland also as well, but it's fundamentally about the big two parties. I think it serves two purposes. It's to, like I say, clean the Tories' hands or keep them clean, and to distribute blame as much as possible. People might say, well, no, it's to solve the problems. I mean, as far as I know, opposition leaders generally don't go into Cobra meetings. I could be wrong. I presume that might be a thing now. And that's new. That didn't happen. That didn't happen before. So if it's not happening in times of war, why should it happen now? I can only really view it through the lens of political calculus.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of Cobra meetings, what I'd say is that Keir Starmer should have access to as much information as he can be given. But the purpose of having that information should be to independently come to the position of the opposition and to scrutinise the government. It shouldn't be to share responsibility for decisions with the government. The government have a majority, and the government have been in charge during a key time in this pandemic. And we're already seeing so many people who are being, kind of somewhat confusing and dishonest when they talk about the coronavirus crisis because they're covering their own back. So you get this when there was a shift from the herd immunity strategy to the suppression strategy, or potentially there wasn't. But in any case, when you listen to Matt Hancock or even the chief medical officer or the chief scientific advisor, they're not completely open with the public because they don't want to admit they've changed their mind. They don't want to admit they've made mistakes. And for example, actually, someone who's not from our wing of the party, having Yvette Cooper on Question Time with Matt Hancock on Thursday was useful because she was there saying, look, there's these inconsistencies in the position you're taking. There's some inconsistencies in what you're talking about testing. Do you want to test and trace? Are you still on a herd immunity strategy? And if there was anything close to a government of national unity, she wouldn't be able to do that. And what would that mean? The public remain ill-informed and also confused because you've got all of the it can be quite confusing watching the Tories talk about coronavirus because they're not being straight with people because on the one hand they're trying to explain their policy, on the other they're trying to cover their backs. And on a third point, they're trying to not say things which are true but which they think will generate bad headlines. So I think absolutely now is the time where it's more important than ever to have a functional opposition which is capable of scrutinizing the government and criticizing them incredibly strongly where they need to. I think we are going to end this stream now, Aaron, but we will be back on Monday at 8. Any final thoughts?
Smash the like button.
Yeah, I like that. It's simple.
And don't leave the Labour Party.
Yep, smash the like button, don't leave the Labour Party, and help us build independent left-wing institutions by going to novaramedia.com/support and donating the equivalent of 1 hour's wage a month. If you are in difficult financial straits because of coronavirus, we will understand if now is not the month for you to do that, but many people will still be getting their usual incomes and have less to spend it on. This will be a cheap Saturday for most people in the UK. Maybe think about giving some of that excess cash to independent left-wing media at a time when it, needs it more than ever. To put it quite simply. Aaron Bastani, it's been a pleasure being joined by you this morning for a change.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And thank you to our audience for watching the Labour leadership election chaotic announcement with us. We will be back on Monday evening. Have a great day.